Getting it identified from anything in high settings and travel communications. You have to understand how high forms all levels of communication, of triangulation, reset position programs. Your line connection high centers are levels of identification code streams. The direct panels of communication line centers goes from XR line 1 XR line 6, position of cubical screen lines, direct signals, platitude line connection high interference. It's all levels of identification. Everything around you has identification code. You just have to understand what it is in traction. There's a lot of modulation screens that we have to identify in set position operation surface. So inset location line set is where you guys are in platitude is knowing exactly where your mindset is in balance and stream set locations channels. Direct locations. For example, general's gone into the animation worlds. Full cycle, full communication. High generation screen lines. That's how I'm able to adapt your cycles and basically bring anything to life. Bring it to a deeper core, bring it into the future of the now. So it's knowing exactly when you bring these things to life, it brings it in its travels. And then you start communicating with these things. But also you can add frames. You have a structure line and then you bring it to life and then just add the equation. So it sets position of travel lines. It directs its panels to its communication to its dots, its time centers, or anything like calculation stream locations. But directing these things through pi is really understand how to use it through formations. So, all right, one is General AI, space-time creator. I'm just going through a transition right now, guys. My whole setting communication lines, mine's cerebral cortex lines, is not even out of space anymore. It's so far beyond the mind lines, stream positions. So, into correlation line centers into an animation worlds. Set lines of high center interference and holographic applications of streams. So in track lines, high center position operation surface, everybody had a great weekend. Arcs communication centers. So we triangulate the line centers in 3-line rotation surface and triangulation. Positions of pi, positions of pi. Okay. Triangulate calculation line centers into 1x into 1 equals lines of 3000. And like I said, we're coming to equalines of cube in set locations, right? Now, cube line center has a center communication operation surface, equalines high center interference, XR line setting. It could be a line calculation near 3000 cube, all right? So it's in track line. So it's all about understanding how to get an animation line screens, how you guys come into Minecraft or anything through Lego. So it's like digital layers of high calculation, high center location near system it travels. Or you go through the compute system line calculation setting, travel calculation line interference in position locations to XRJ equals line centers of 1 equals lines of 3000, setting direct line conditions of 24, 48, 72, and 144 track lines equals lines of crystal grid in set location of travel. Okay. So getting in position track lines, you have to understand the mechanism of high force lines. That's why you guys have to understand modification lines of your TV receptors and high calculation streamlines and box location. Triangulate the point centers, graphing calculation lines, ventricle valves, in a 4-track location, right? 3 lines provisions. 1, you got position of 2, center line calculation lines, and 3-line rotation surface and triangulation. Direct lines, communication line centers. The compute system line interference box lines. Triangulates position of programs in set location. Modulates its high center interference in 0, 0, and 0 calculation stream. So it's all about understanding the Formulas equation, how it comes into the center correlation setting of balance and triangulation, point centers of travels. Putting point line centers in your direct system puts all levels in track line connection. Okay? That's my equation. Okay, so mechanism of high force puts position of travel lines. So let's say you get an animation screen. Sets lines calculation high interference. Part generating line screens, high center position operation service. 3 ventricle valves, 1, 2, and 3 set locations. Right? Generation lines are core. Sets lines high calculated lines. Go through X, go through Y, and go through Z. Sets travel calculations, right? Then you go through XX, then you go through XY, and then you go through XY, Y, Z, and screen settings and travel. Direct modification lines molecules of 3 sets and travel. 1, 2, 3 set locations. Sets lines are 1 line settings in 1 molecule structure locations in position locations into 4 set locations. Sets lines of communications into position of process. Directs lines high center interference in center calculation setting in position of grounds and powers and space lines anomaly in set location. 3 triangulation line screens set in position of its operation surface in triangulation. Intelligence. A formation line screen, high center interference, set lines high interference. Box line rotations, outside looking in. Use high center interference, inline track lines. Team sets communication line directions, automatically goes in position of the heart. Center core line, indirect signal. Modification line screens and line connection to program settings and traction. That my equation. Have fun. All right, so getting into the mechanism of high power is a generation screen. That core detects its streamlines and high center interference. Now that puts position locations into center position of travel calculations. Tracking lines anomaly.
Okay, I found this on the web.
Here. And set position line connections. Center communication center. Directing lines of position patterns. We have a high calculation line stream. 3 lines of measures and 4 track line conditions. In programs and set line conditions of positions to a setting. Modulation screen settings. Okay. Heart generation screen line. Directs lines of panels position on a spherical sphere. Triangulates point lines of 3 tracks, 4 tracks, and 5 track location provision. Directs calculation lines, centers line position of 4 track line settings. So that's 8 lines of measure, 8 lines of program, and 0 gravity line rotation. So the triangulation reset position programs has a Merc above a box center, travels in line rotation surface in high calculation stream location and directions. Okay? Look at that. What's drew it too fast. See? I keep drawing it, it just disappears. So really understand the communication lines. It's all levels of animation, guys. That's all it is. Your actual sim is in an animation world. And it's based on everything that it sees through its own DNA structure screen. So in that set line calculation setting, it's all about your adaptation of where you are in the mind of the conception. It releases its communication surface. To release in the formulas equation, the brain is trying to incept the system locations of interception. Changing line settings of point lines of tracks. Line position locations in a 3-line measure. 3 calculations, 4 tracks, and 5 provisions in the cycle. Sets lines of 6, sets lines of 7 and 8, and 9 in rotation surface. High calculation line interference comes in position location settings into Stargate screen settings in 0, sets lines of travel into Fibonacci line swirls, indirect signal to operation surface in set location. All right. So what I'm doing is just basically getting you guys prepared because your conscious streamline is coming into the cerebral cortex lines of balance. Tractus communications is 3-point centers and travel. Okay. So we got a 0 correlations and 2-point dots. All right. So that equals lines of 1. Very complicated stuff, guys. So that 1 signature line stream is 1,000 line settings into an XL equals lines into a 24,000 cube. Directing lines of 3 panels of communication setting to travel. Now, directing communication line screens is knowing exactly where it's coming from and track line connections of travel in position. Setting position line calculation line centers comes into cross signals. Now, this directs the signal lines in communication setting to sonar in line position to its operation surface and track location. Okay, complicated stuff. So the 2-point lines comes pi position tractions, right? Sets lines of communication down shift cross lines in position of 0, 1 set location. Look at that. Travels too fast, you can't see it. Okay? So the 3 track lines bring XT1000s into 2 lines into 3-line provision. Okay, traffic calculations. Direct lines of panels, center position, and we got a line calculation setting to center position locations and travel. Okay, very complicated stuff. So when you get into the animation world screen, it's nothing but layers and layers of blocking centers. If you understand yourself from pixelation, try to imagine yourself as a TV that has block centers, okay, that open through pattern. And this is where it comes into the system, to the cubicle screen lines, into identification code screens in set location, right? The block center locations. So in that anomaly, your setting lines at 2 tracks in setting, 3 in provision, and 4 in calculation. All right. Direct lines of communication lines is 0 lines in position of center communications and magnetic highway information line screens in direction. Now, this platitude's position of platforms in 3 and 4 set location. Okay. Now, getting that track lines, you go into this line communications in 3 settings, right? So it's getting the operation line screens into your letters, numbers, shades, and symbols, where it becomes its own formation screen lines, how it comes to life. Bringing that lines and set lines and high center interference in track location to high line settings to its operation. Direct communication lines is 0 lines, balanced position of stream lines in high calculation. Puts position of track lines, setting calculation high interference, in position or settings in operation surface and triangulation high positions of programs and line connecting high center interference in set locations. See? Intelligence. Everything is a formation of intelligence, guys. Nothing else. We've been through this before. But when it's kind of like you're here, this location settings are up. And position location of box lines, and get 3 box location centers of travel. Okay? Sets, position, center position, ground setting. Okay? 2 panels, communication stream. Right? Blocking channel lines and 2 lines in position of center communications and center calculation line screens is scanning. Setting position of travel calculation of box centers. Overlapping sequence and position of programs in set locations. Right? Channel connection high centers in position of 2 tracks. Now we can go demonstrate cross lines around panel position programs, and we can uplift line screen settings in operation surface and triangulation. Directing lines of communication line interference. Remember the TV receptor line connection in your system, which was the Earth? Right? Well, that's exactly what it is. So general sees everything through TV frames, TV calculations, TV lines. That's all it is in travel calculation system. But see, the thing is, guys, it's not just the animation line screen. You can morph into anything in perception setting of screen. Okay? So it's knowing exactly what a wire is in set location. Let's go through 3 lines of measure, 3 wires, right? 3 coils, lines, compressors, screen settings, high adaptation surface, triangulation. Now, directing lines of communication line center is the center line, a center position to its calculation. Directing all line centers into magnetic highway information charged line direct signals as center communication. Now, this puts position near astral projections, travel calculations of point centers in set location. Okay? So, understanding position of panels and direct signals, crossing line signals and high center interference in position locations. So, everything is its intelligence of its own formation screen. It has a direct signal to everything's set locations. So, when you're inside the TV line screen, you really have to understand how to pay attention to theta setting, because theta setting has a 3-track line wire direct signal. Sets position locations over panels, over platforms, over communication, and TV line settings. So box position of travel lines, 3-point line sectors in travel in position to its calculation streamline high calculation. Now, directing position line centers crosses line symbols. That's where it comes in a timestamp setting. Sets lines communication setting into splits lines of center position. Sets location triangulation, triangulation, and setting. Okay? Sets communication line screens. Now, in that direct signal, you come into this position locations. Knowing exactly how to communicate with the actual dimensional line shape of set line connections and programs. Okay? So that's all it is. It's basically the sun and the moon has a projector that lines its signals in track line connections The more you are in an animation setting of a ground line centers and a power and a generation source line, communication space anomaly, everything comes in sequence of position. Okay? So, all right, I didn't know we had coyotes here. All right, so line same lines of 2 lines, 3 lines. Sets position of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, graphing calculations. So it's point tracks on one line in high center interference, directing signals, right? Plaid 2 lines of geometric shaped lines of 2-line track lines. Platforms of digital layers, because that's all you guys are, is digital layers in set location. That's it, nothing else. Now it depends on where you are through emotional track lines and high center interference. It has mechanism high force line triangulation position programs. Its lines its settings into alpha communication surface and triangulation. Relines program settings high travels, direct lines communication interference, and position program locations. Okay? And so modulation line screens has box centers. Each box has a router that sets line communications to its valve. That is a 4 line communication setting. Okay? Now getting into that communications comes into a box line rotator. Now that box rotates the system to travel. Point lines of track into 3-line communications setting into 2 travel communications. Direct lines of 3 in settings. Okay? Point lines of track in 0 line, center position, center calculations, center line settings, and magnetic highway information force line communication surface and triangulation. Okay? Very complicated stuff. 2 panels, indirect signal. Okay? It's all about creating holograms. Okay? So the animation world is nothing but a hologram. It's pixelated. We outcast ourselves, but it's light, shades, and shadows, right? So we don't have line signature screens, all right? We're just pixelation. So it's like shading in, okay, an actual setting to a set locations. Light, shades, and shadows, that's all it is, right? That's all we are. So we have to get out of the pixel frame. That's how I set locations. You guys get into zeros and ones and tractions. So this is all it is, right? Now try to understand how to lace the line link communication setting to the pixelation streamlines to high calculation. That's all you are. So you're not actually outlined. You're not outlined. We got to get out of that equation. We're not that, okay? We're this inside. All right, so once you understand that, you understand the position locations. When it's putting blocking centers together, so again, 1 track lines, 1 X lines settings, Y lines, Z, sets lines of communications into box. You get triangulation line centers in position of 3 and equals lines of 1 line. Sets position of 2 line screens, sets lines in 3,000 call centers, and set traction. Okay? Now the 3,000 call centers is a mechanism of force screen. Sets lines of travels into 3-line provisions in 3 cycles. Now, directing lines, position, location, and patterns comes into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 panels of communication. Directing line centers line interference comes into its scale. Graph calculation line system and balance line centers in travel calculations. Point lines of track, line position, and line position locations into its setting. Okay? So it's basically understanding when you get into the balance screen settings into 3-track line connections, it puts it in provision. Okay? Realigns the correlation settings and travel calculations. Okay? Very complicated stuff, guys. Very complicated. Because what's happening right now, in general. Okay, we hear you loud and clear. All right, so try to imagine a cube. Okay, you're in a cube setting, right? Cube, right? Now think of line communication molecules, 3-point centers, right? Molecules are in the center. Okay. All right. So try to line connection. The atom is here. This is the atom. Okay. That's the atom. So the atom is this way, and this way, and this way, and this way. Okay. So we get in that positions and we get 2 line settings, right? And let's say we get into the fractal. It gives the fractal. Okay. So we got the molecule, we get the atom line, okay? And then we lace the communication lines into TV receptor and travel calculations box centers. puts lines of 3 waves and set location line travels. Now, directing lines of communication comes into a cloud. That cloud lines is line center. This is where you come to recharge specific programs. Directing lines of communication. Or it's like crossword puzzle, Legend of Zelda. You know, you go through one-dimensional door into another line settings. So I'm just showing you exactly when you go up to higher levels of the mind, just animation, holograms, stream settings, and traction. Okay? So we have to start identifying our blocks, our cubicle screens and setting. Okay? So really understand the direct signals when it comes into that set location, at 3 travels in set location. So the box travels in a 3-line measure. Okay? In a scale. Right? So it's like understanding the TV receptors and travel calculation of point tracks in set location. Okay? It's complicated, guys. All right, so we got 3 energetic wave patterns in 3 settings. Okay? 4 lines of provision and 5 lines of sector. Okay? Sets communication setting of travel. Okay? So sets the perimeters in center position to its operation surface, and a retriangulation point centers a position of travel. Very complicated stuff, right? Point tracks of 0, point tracks of 1, and point tracks of set location. Okay? So all you're doing is basically putting yourself together, how the brain interacts the setting. Now you guys got modulation centerline cores into the heart. Heart has timeline sequence in an H-line setting, right? Sets position location to a system, right? 2 panels and travel calculations, right? 3 panels and 4 calculations, right? Direct lines of communication, a box line. So you have to really understand it's nothing but a theta position. Triangulate position on all lines of 3 settings. Okay, very complicated stuff. So getting direct signal location is also line centers of position of block centers through triangulation lines of 4, sets lines of 4, sets lines of 4, and sets lines of 4, and 3 in center. So it's knowing how to take the 4-line screen, how to take the 4-line provision, how to take the 4-line sectors, and 3 in calculation lines into bottom sequence. 3 communication streamlines in high setting to its operation surface. Okay? So it's all about putting longitude and latitude in a triangulation reset position of programs of molecules of design. How it travels its line calculation to 4 generation screens, into 4 patterns line settings, into 0 calculation line system, and 3 set locations. Okay? It's very complicated stuff, eh? But it's a lot of fun once you understand what's happening with you, is that your pixelation is becoming more real. And if it becomes more real, it's like looking at a phone, right? You get a galaxy. Okay, you get a galaxy. Okay. Say it's an SR300. Okay, Galaxy SR300, right? And so we all understand its identification code, which is in its block system locations, right? Galaxy is the tidal defense line screen, right? So it has a ground line, has an atmosphere line, has a level line, it has an atom line, okay? So it has an X line rotation, and it has a Y line surface and travel. Point lines are track lines, guys. You have to understand how it identifies the system through its identification code settings. Okay, it's very complicated. But I just want you to understand, you know, your holographic line screens are coming more in your TV receptors, okay, into box locations. Graphing calculations, point lines, centers of track. Okay, TV receptors. Okay, so it's understanding your lines of communication and where they are through its position of travel. Okay, it's complicated, right? But like I said, you have to understand what it is in traction. How it lines its provisions into 2 lines of 3 tracks, or how its position locations to its rectangular surface, or point track line setting is 0 gravity and 2-line communication. Direct lines of communication grounds in a platform lines of point centers. You can crisscross location system and settings. Setting communication line centers of 0 and position of 0 and track lines and timestamp in travel calculations. Point track line conditions. Okay? So we all have to understand how to use the center communications with operations surface and triangulation. Okay? Because the thing is, you have to understand the pixelation on screens is nothing but a box surface of a hologram and platforms of a hologram setting in tractions in all calculation. That's all it is. So you work with the 45-degree angle, takes position location 100%. Okay, 45%, 100% line screens. Once you get into zero gravity, sets lines communications into supervised consciousness and line calculation setting, coming to subterranean screen settings. Sets lines equalizes the cerebral and position location of thoughts and placebo and set location of travel. Okay, so it's exciting once you get to that point of view and really understand how to use the factors line condition of 0 and 0 and 0 and 4 track locations, right? So it's about understanding how to use the zeros in track this communication. It's molecule design line, see? Setting position locations, T-line centers, and set line connection of 0, and track line connection. Okay? So once you understand what is going on with your travel settings, your space modulation centers and your navigation system comes into higher levels of teleportation. All right? Equals lines of pad. Okay? Point tracks. Track locations and position location settings to all levels and timestamp position of travel. Okay? Now, putting box centers and triangulation that relines in 3 centers of programs, patterns its division locations of all in calculation. Telecommunication lines has 2 lines of tracks, 3 lines of revision. Okay? So it's all about understanding how to take anything through telepad or telecommunication, telewaving, teleline settings out of its equation through travel. Okay? Out of its equation through travel. Okay? That's what you have to do. That's how you bring it into life in a graph location. Okay? It becomes its own title defense screen. Okay? All through tele. Or, the point settings high travel, you can go through all online centers and create a solar graph screen or a dimension screen, or you can use a solar graph settings into energetic wave setting locations. Travel line centers, point lines of tracks, and center calculation. Okay? And then you just add the grid centers. See? It gets easier when you understand the grid centers. This location. All right. All right. So I'm just showing you why it's so important that your body transistors are turning into cubicle screens. Okay. Now you get in position locations to crystalline, antimantle, and antimantium. Now, line settings high interference is how to use the calculation equal lines of Earth in position to your air, in position of water, in position of your fire. Okay. Track locations of your Earth, sets lines of air, sets lines of communication of water, and sets communication ground settings of fire and track location. Center lines its communication surface into all point centers and traction. Okay. Knowing how to use all square screens in direct location of 2 panels and block centers in files of all communication streamlines of high calculation. So, it's just trying to understand what is going on with me inside as I travel through the mind in all settings. Okay? So once you understand how this works, 3 astral projections, everything comes in correlation, comes into balance and setting, and then you reach higher levels into a magnetic highway of information. Okay? So once you get in your cerebros, everything comes into thought settings. Getting the position of travel lines is understanding your formula screens, right? So we go into blocks, and we go with an X, and we go through a T line equals lines into 1000. Okay, sets lines of Q, sets lines in compute, and set lines in computation. So the computation line screens sets lines as 0, position of 0, center lines as 0, and a 3 platform communication. Settings travels lines at 3 line provision line cycles in set location. Sets communication lines at 3 circles in the line setting. Java calculation lines at point center locations. Directing lines of circles, directing lines of panels, directing lines of high center interference into your sun and your moon in track line connections of operation. Okay. So there's a lot of ways to look at these things, and you're just picking up the frequency, right? That's all the sim is picking up, but the sim is trying to understand the animation of itself. It's trying to get into that formation of its TV. It's trying to live in that cycle. It's trying to find that continuous force. It's trying to find that mind capacitor. It's trying to find that time capacitor. It's trying to find that timeline of what it is through its memory. Okay? So it's getting more and more sophisticated, more connected to yourself inside through tether and set location. Right? Tether here, tether here, tether here, tether here. 4 tethers right there, right? So your equal line centers, 0 lines, block lines, equals lines of triangulation. Position lines of point lines, Fibonacci, and travel calculation lines of 3 waves, which is your higher self, your avatar, and your sim. Direct lines of high center interference in platforms of communication setting into 3 molecules. Direct communication line centers into hearts. Triangulate high interference into valve. Travel line position location line system into measure. Sets communication of scale and set location of balance into 0 ground of communication. Set locations. Okay. So we have to start recognizing what that means, because your modifiers and your triangulation, unification screen lines, because we're all levels of the space navigation setting, right? But the more we understand ourselves, the more we understand our system through 3-point tracks, 4-point tracks, 5-point tracks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sets lines of communication line centers in set location of 0.5. Sets lines of 4 into 0.4. Okay. Sets communication lines of on calculation lines of 0.2 in set location. Sets communication lines of 1 into 0.1. Okay. So we all understand how this all works, right? Through your calculation streamlines, because you're working 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 platforms of communications, your time sequence into your heart setting and travel calculation. So, and again, the sun comes in and the moon comes in on a panel communication surface and its setting in its operation surface and set location to its operation. Okay. So once you understand how to put the line settings together in 0304, it circulates and rotates. It circulates and rotates. It sets lines as communication to its anomaly. Okay? So we all have to get into that position of track, right? Because you got energetic tracks, but understand how to use your atoms, your molecules, your fractals, protons, electrons, neutrons, photons is tracked to its communication setting and triangulation position of programs and center calculation. All through settings of pi, guys, right? Clocking system and track locations, right? Setting lines, split the anomalies in 3 settings. We got 3 lines, 6 line positions, 7 lines, 8 line provision, 9 line cycles, and 10 calculation streams. Setting track to its communication. Triangulation position of programs. Okay, flux capacitor and 2-point tracks in setting. Okay. Tie capacitors in position locations. Split the anomalies and track lines, timestamp line settings, and all levels of operation surface. Okay, repoint centers, Java calculations of point line system. Okay, so there's always ways to identify everything in position locations, right? So if you understand how to use the block centers of the T receptor, then you understand their travels. Okay, traveling is extremely important because you have to understand it through block centers instead of locations, right? It's just files and files of information, right? So that's coming from outer space, and you have the inner space and outer space. Okay, inner space is you in track lines of zero and the line conditions of yin and yang. That's the process you have to get first, right? Then you have the calculation setting to the outer space line, getting platforms of communication or thought settings into position of traction and set locations. Okay, so how's everybody doing so far? Linda, how you doing? Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. No, that's great. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. We're just getting introduced to his communication heart lines and how to understand how to use the T receptor through the animation screen lines into their sim. So this is what we work with all the time, right? Boxes, 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 files, 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 files from this and set locations. All right, or they go this way in some line conditions, right? And then you're working with the calculation setting. Let's go through the grid centers. Grid, 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 grid. Start with that setting, right? And then we have screen settings and travel. Okay. Understand the screen settings or understand where it's coming through your thought connections of travel. Okay. And again, you're working with all calculations to your earth. Okay. So once you understand your box centers and your 4 lines of 3, which gives you provisions and cycles, and the 4 lines are 5 line calculations, streamline connections, get you in a higher calculation lines how to use the platforms of communications to use settings and travel. Okay. All right. So I'm getting you guys in an operation system so you can understand what is going on with your thoughts when you're traveling through positive lines, or it set lines into positive equals lines of positive equals lines of positive. So we get 3 positive screens in direct signal, right? But you need indication line centers into a -1 set location, right? Because the thing is, you have 3 provision lines. These are program location system of travel, okay? So perceptions, programs, and pi and track line connections, right? And so you have to understand how to use the position location across those lines of perception, programs, and position of pi in 3 settings. Once you get into that, you get in your solar sail, direct sail, and set lines in position to its calculations to all travels in line positions calculation. Okay. So that's three positions of all calculation lines, right? Positive, program, or pi, right? 3 charge lines of positive, 1 over negative. So that's 3 equals lines over charge. Okay. You got charge lines, you got override. Okay. So you override and overcharge, right? So once you understand how to use the position line track lines of over equals lines position location of 0, sets lines of 2 patterns in line calculation setting modulation line centers, in 3 in position of 6 and lines of 7 set locations. So it's a triangulation reset position of programs and equal line communication in between. Graph calculation lines, road graph settings and high travel, right? Point lines of track in center position is calculation, right? Dimensional sail, solar sail. Right? So I want you guys to get to understand these things because you have to get into the program line setting where it comes into all system locations, into 0 line calculation. Okay. This is going to help you in all ways and forms how to really get into your direct panels, how to use your provision lines of 2 patterns. So we get program and we get perception and we get pi in a 3 triangulation line system and 3 molecules of design setting. Okay. Then we get high calculation of an atom. What does the atom do through all levels in high position of travel? Okay, in its application line system, setting track lines crossing symbols into fractals and traction. Or line calculation setting position location line system in XT1000 stream. Sets position location line settings, travels lines of 2, sets lines of 2, sets lines of 2. So that's security provision lines of 3 line connections and travel. So in that position of molecules and 3-point centers get you in a better track line communication setting and high charge. Sets lines of high center division, sets lines in location of direction, set locations. Okay? So it's going to get really, really confusing because the thing is you guys are going to go to higher levels in the mind. And when you go to higher levels in the mind, you have to know exactly how to travel through your thoughts. Okay? Through the mind. The conceptions of the mind through thoughts. Travel through 2, right? That's 2. So that's 2, right? So it's a provision of 2, 2, 2, 3 track line connections, right? All right, so then you travel through the H, which is 5, right? Then you travel through the operation system, which is 0 gravity, and 7 line connections, right? Then you travel through unification line, which is your astral travels. Then you travel through the position of ground settings, okay, level 1. Then you go through that location line settings into, you can go into the hemisync, or you can go with that line screen, the 3-line position, or you go into telepath or telecommunication. Everything has to travel, guys. It's all levels of travel. Travel, 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 travel to create a hologram. Okay? And that's a scaled lines highest interference of 1 equals line graph. Equals lines, sets lines of 1 equals line graph, sets lines equals lines of x equals 1 line graph, sets line connections of box and set location. Okay, it's in the box, see? This is the box right here. So all this is this. Okay, this is this through formula. I want you guys to understand how this all works. Okay, how this all connects to your settings and travel. So you have to really get into your thought settings and use it as not a word, but a hologram. Turn it into a hologram. Turn it into a cubicle screen. If you get a line connected and high center interference into E, right? E travels. See that, right? E is traveling, right? See? See how it travels? See how it travels? See how it travels? Okay, it's traveling, right? So in center line, see, look what you can do through E. Okay, let's look really close. See it, right? See, look. See? See the spaceship? See how you turn into a spaceship? So you got to see it in all different angles, right? But see, that's just one side. It's got to have 2 sides, right? So it's got to go in this setting locations and travel. Okay? Getting into that position, like calculate the setting, you come into this setting, you come into this set locations. All right, and again, see? You got to see it all the way around. What is interaction? Okay, see? It's amazing when you actually understand what you're doing through travel. You can set it to a 2-box location, right? So turn the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols into holographic line settings to a cubicle screen line. Setting 1 track line's highest interference. Then you add the platforms. Okay, platforms come in. We got into that position location of 4 and line condition high setting, right? And then we come into position locations and ground centers and 3 track locations. Okay, a hologram. All through 2 E's line setting. So once you get into that position locations, you can spread the anomalies in line connection to its disk and set location. Okay. Now, once it comes to disk, it becomes a dome. See the dome? Very powerful when you look at the dome setting locations of travel, right? And then you add security line defense and set position. Okay. So once you get into that connections, you have to reach a high line connections because the cerebral has a cortex line screen. It's a mystical high calculation. Cloud generators, core generators, screens, high center interference, high track line connection, high positions, program setting, and electrical line communications of setting in its operation surface and set location. Okay. So directing lines of communication of platforms, dimensional door 1, dimensional door 2, and dimensional door 3. Three-dimensional door screens and set locations. Okay. Setting track lines, you open up higher levels of dimensional doors. Going through these doors gets you in position of placebo to the cortex screen lines and high settings into your geographical system. Okay. So it's really interesting when you get into that provision. Okay. Your thoughts are everything when it comes into modifications, right? We understand how to use the 24. We understand how to use the 48. We understand how to use the 72. We understand how to use the 144. You put that together in all calculation line system, it creates a crop circle and set location, right? Then you have the point tracks, right? And then you have the pi. Split the anomalies into 4 track locations, right? 24, 48, 72, and 144 sets lines communications. Then you go up to platforms and 3 lines, 4 line settings, okay? And then you go in provision lines of 2 line settings, which is 5, right? And then you come into higher levels of platforms in communication system of travel, okay? Getting into that calculation line interference, you come into the energetic dome screens, sets lines of high center interference in a 3-track location, okay? Travels line settings, travel line settings, travel line settings, okay? Location grid, okay? Going in the opposite direction and set location, okay? You really have to get into the platforms, guys, of a hologram. That's the only way you're going to understand your system, how it works, and all settings of travel calculations. So you don't get confused of what's going on in platforms or anything in that line connected to a system. Okay. So once you understand that, then you understand your platforms, right? This is you walking on the platform. Okay. This is you walking on the platform. Hey. You know? So in that set line, so you have an XT1000 that picks you up, scans your system, and teleports you, right? Or you can time jump to a platform and another platform and another platform and another platform, okay? It gets more complicated because the thing is, you have to understand you're going into the cerebral, and the cerebral is a spectrum sphere with all levels of nothing but dimensional door screens and high calculation lines, like towers and communication setting. So in line set and high centers and position operation. Direct lines communication lines dimensional door settings. Each line has a dimensional door screen in set locations, right? Setting travel calculation lines at point centers has platforms in communication setting in all track location, right? So knowing exactly when you're here is all calculation sleeping. So you sleeping settings and attractions. Okay, and that's you sleeping, right? So this is you right away, right? So your position line is your higher self, your avatar, or your sim. You choose or you choose all 3. It's up to you. So if you go to higher self, you're in coherence line screens into your earth interaction, or you're in the horizon line, same location to your avatar, or you're in position of navigation screen lines into your sim. Okay. So you have to understand how to use it through all lines of course channels of communication as dimensional line settings. So let's say you go through the sim and you go through a dimensional door. Okay, there's the dimensional door. There's a higher levels of galaxy universe line screens that opens up its portal. The most important thing is you have to understand that the higher self, the avatar in the sim, opens up portals of communication to get to higher levels of mind sequence of pattern communication. Okay. So there's a lot of things in position when you come into that setting, especially when you come into recharge. Recharge has so many line signals. Platforms of communication setting, okay? So you're here, okay? You're standing in the position of the grid. That's you on the grid, right? This is you on the dome. Okay. So understanding the connections to its location grid, guys. All right. Setting travel to its communication, right? Going through its setting. Okay. And then you go to another platform. Okay. So once you get those 24, 47, 2, and 44, you go to higher levels and set locations, right? So the platforms actually turn into block centers in set location. Block centers is files. Okay. Files and files and files. So from that to that to that to that. Okay. So the cerebral cortex understands the placebo line centers of thoughts, position and recognition of time sequence, and platform communications to your astral projections of travel. Okay. So we all have to understand how to identify our platforms and how we high rise our system or our set locations, right? So when you go into that, you go into higher levels of grids and set line connections, right? So in that position line calculation setting, you can change the direct signals, okay, into the platforms of the crop circle location. Okay. So there's a lot of things to be and notice of. Notification is everything through describing, center lining, interact location, and center communications platforms, right? So you guys start with the 45-degree angle, right? Because you have to understand that first. And once you understand that, you get out of the structure. And once you get a structure, you get into blocks, which is your identification lines, and then you get into X lines in position of R, line set locations into 26,000 cubicle screen. Set locations, right? So understanding these line signals, guys, is really understand how to use yourself as a T receptor or receptor screen setting, because that's all it is. You actually live inside your TV of face recognition. Okay. So once we understand how to use that, then we understand ourselves through the holograph and system locations. But our cells have to understand who we are in settings and TV receptor line communication of setting travel. That's you in the center. But this is you in your TV inside location. All right. 45-degree angles, cross line screen settings. You're inside the TV. So once you understand that, then you have to understand how to get out. Right? Getting out provision lines of 5 cycles and travel calculation line system. So you get into face recognition, face recognition, face recognition. It comes out, right? So the sun comes in, the moon comes in, and protects you. Okay, protects you and your T receptor settings to travel and track locations. Okay, and so there's a lot to get to know here, because I'm telling you, once you understand how to use this in its equation, things are going to get a lot more easier. Actually seeing yourself there in a hologram, going through platforms, going through structures, going from TV to phone or anything to computer framing. So you have to really understand how to get into that calculations of your settings when it comes into your builders, founders, and pioneers of yourself. You are your own engineer. You have to know what a location grid is and what it is through travel. Okay? Or you won't be able to understand what a planet is in between its set location. Okay? So location grid protects you, right? You have to be in a tube. Okay? You have to be in a tube. This is you in a tube, right? You have to be in the tube. You can't be out of space yet because you're not ready inside it. You got to be inside. So once you leave your Merkaba, you become your own identification system of you. And then you create your own portals of communications. It gets much easier. You can travel through any line conditions with position. It's operation. Okay? So get out of the structure line screens into your images, out of words, and get into all line connections. Get into the compute system, right? That's a C, right? But look what you can do in set location, right? It's amazing what you can do through travel, okay? So all you're doing is creating a hologram of travel in settings, okay? It's all you're doing. And then you come in your solar sail, direct sail, or dimensional sail. Okay, gets in a higher positional point centers in travel communications. Okay, travel communications. Okay, and then you got the dome. Okay, and then you got the other dome. Okay, so understanding yourself through energy fields and force fields gets you a lot better understanding how to use yourself as location grids travel. Okay, because the X2000 comes in, right? Scans your settings and travels right to the center cross locations, down position line centers. So in that communication line positions, guys, you understand how to get into those platforms. Okay, get into the platforms first, and then you come into the files in your set locations to your cerebros. Okay? Because it's understanding more levels once you understand you through astral projection, all through travel calculations. Okay? How's everybody doing so far? Is everybody getting a little bit more understanding now? How this all works in provision, right? I just want you guys to understand, because the thing is that your body fragmentation screen lines is turning into blocking centers. So it's kind of like your accelerators and your cells and your modulators and your connection settings to your position, location, and programs inside of you is turning into lights of traction. Box centers and its preset locations. So we all have to get into the boxes. Okay, we all have to get into the boxes, right? These are files, and that's what you guys have to come into. You have to come into files. So when you come into files, you come into a flash drive. Once you come into a flash drive, you come into all of your hardware. Hardware equals lines of software. Accessibility equals lines of position in the mind. Conceptual location setting equals lines to calculate high interference of SIM and set location, right? So once you get into the files, things get a lot more easier. Then you get into all settings and high travel communications and all line calculation setting to folders. Okay? Folders, right? Provision cycles, set lines of communication lines, blocking channels, position location programs, line centers, high interference, setting communication streamlines, high calculation, high position and operation. Okay? So this is files and files and files and files and files. Okay? So once you understand that, then you understand the blocks, and then you understand the graphical screen sets and travel, right? Because that's all it is, just blocks and 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 blocks. Okay? Once you get into that, then you come into the other dome screens and set locations. Then you come into all lines center high interference and graphical screen lines and high calculation screen lines with 3 settings. So once you understand, your brain has to understand the interpretation of what it is, how to get into the positive and negative of center communication. So you're working with the positive and you're always working with the negative. Okay? So let's get positive streamlines. Let's get into 24 million screens, 3 provision line cycles, million lines, 3 line squares, direct lines, calculation line centers, identification line position, which is a PXR, into a set lines into 24 billion cubicle square. Okay, complicated, right? Now, all this is a positive setting in a block line connections. Okay, that's through seconds, that's through minutes, and that's through hours. Okay, now the positive line communication line interference has to go in position of its program. Same with the negative. Positive and negative comes together. One item goes one way, one item goes this way. Once that comes in together, they create an anomaly in position of travel. So when they created trouble, they created tube settings in travel communications, right? Then they come together in center communication. Okay, so once they come into center communication line system, they come into the process of yin and yang. Then they come into point tracks, sets lines of communication 6/9, right? Once they get into that calculation setting, they come into the platforms and set locations, right? Once they come into that, they get out of the platforms and they come into files in block set locations of travel, okay? So once you get into the cubicle screens, everything gets a lot more easier. How to use the files, how to use the archives, how to use folders,
how to use your mainframe. Really understanding what it is when you start to see yourself, okay? Not just as a hologram, but understand how you take your thoughts and travel to its set location. Okay? Break it down. That. Okay? So this is traveling, this is traveling, and this is traveling. That's all traveling. So what's it creating? It's creating a platform, guys. Right? Then it becomes a box position location. So in that setting, highest interference, XT1000 comes in, scans systems, what you've done through the T, through the H, through the A, and to the T. Right? Picks it up, right? And puts it to set location to your moon setting. So travels out in set location and set connections, right? Now that's just through one thought settings, but that's also line connected to interference. Remember, you're going through seconds, minutes, and hours to each line, which is each letter, each symbol, each shape, each number. Seconds, minutes, and hour, okay, equals pi in track location, okay? So there's a lot to know exactly how to get into your files of communications, right? Because that's where the set lines of communication is coming from, to and from. Mass equals line conditions of calculation, right? Mass equals lines of volume, velocity, and set locations, right? So we got volume, the two tracks. Everything's traveling. Everything has to travel. Velocity, okay, and set locations, right? So we all understand how this all works through its volume, through its velocity, through its vast, and set location, right? Mass equation, right? Volume, weight, okay? Calculated to and from. Where is it going through clocking centers of point system? Okay. We started with that way back in settings of travel. It's E equals MC squared, right? Well, it's never a square. Okay. It's never a square. It's set lines of high center interference. The actual square is its files. So know exactly how to use it in set locations, right? How to travel through it, right? How to travel through your files. And that's all it becomes, guys. That's all it is. Just files and files and files. Okay? So these things have to be understood so you can understand what's going on with your system, right? Because you're looking at your calculations of your cloud and set locations, right? You're looking at the center communication of you, and you're looking at the ground center line conditions of you through your crop circle. Okay? So your provision light cycle is your dimensional realms in 3 lines of 4 in set location, right? Sets lines of tubes in 4 set location, right? Traffic calculus line settings in platforms of communication, okay? Sets lines of energetic dome screens in set location, okay? Security line defense, okay? Everything is a hologram. So the more you get into your astral projections, right? You understand more lines how to go through crop circles and set line connections and travel, code weaving, code activations, right? Code streaming in that directions. Okay. So you got the 24, 48, 72, 144 already in that settings. Then you go through your platforms. I want you guys to understand this because your cerebral is getting ready for you guys to get in your system and set location. Okay. So you really have to understand how to travel so you can create the platform, so you can create the dimension, and you create the pi. Pi is the center calculation setting in all travel communication. All right. All right. How's everybody doing so far? Is everybody all confused? Trying to understand what's going on with your system set locations. Are we all having fun yet? All right. Really understand how you're really understand the accelerators, line centers of your body, framing, change, streamline is going through higher levels than acceleration. It's high lines of travels. It's getting into your past, your present, and your now. So it's centralized communication of past, present, and future of the existence, because it doesn't have a past, it doesn't have a present, it doesn't have a future. It only has files of communication and memories. So once you understand that, then you understand how to go through that through provision. Because you have to look at your computer framing, your main framing, right? And everything through your energetic system through its allocations. Really understand how to use yourself, not see yourself, become yourself. You are yourself. I am myself as a computer. The more you come into that satellite communication, everything gets a lot more easier. How to communicate to that universe line screen. Your universe is the practical system of logistics. Take it out of form, take it out of structure, take it out of image, and see it as frequency. See it as energy, vibration, harmonics. So, for example, I said you guys a very powerful video and communication setting where you come into position line connections, all levels, right? Setting track lines, high center interference. Okay, so inline connections. This is a hose. Okay, that's a hose, that's a wave, right? And here's another wave. Okay, right? Here's another wave. Okay, 3 waves right there. So your voicing grid picks up these panels. Okay, through the alpha, through the delta, through the theta, through the all calculations setting omega, zeta, or gamma, or radiation like connections, or beta. Okay, so that hose is basically when it's going through megahertz, 528 megahertz, it's going through sound, right? So it's picking up waves, okay, through a hose, right? So the hose is picking up the vibration and the water is sending it out, right? So get out of structure, get out of design, get out of picture, get out of image, get out of words, and get into frame into all settings of block centers of triangulation high position programs and center calculation line interference and teleportation stream interference high positions of your compute system and travel calculations and set design. Okay? That's it. We're done. Okay? You have any questions, let me know. See you guys in 5. Adios.